So this last weekend, I got the chance to go to Barberry to visit some friends that were living in Stockholm that had grown up there and they had family connections in the Swedish town of Barberry. If you're not familiar where that is, it's about an hour or so south of Gothenburg. And this was only actually my second time ever to the West Coast. I had visited some friends in Gothenburg 2 years ago in November. People are always saying Gothenburg is a beautiful town in the summertime. In November, basically all the leaves and everything had already fallen off the trees. It was already starting to get rainy and cold in this winter sort of feel. But yeah, going back this time was really, really cool to see another perspective on the West Coast. We did stop in Gothenburg for like 30 minutes and went out and took some pictures in the town, but we didn't have much time to go there because all of the fun stuff that we had planned for the weekend was happening down in Barberry. And while I was in Barberry, I got a completely new perspective on life in Sweden because, as you know, I did live in Norrköping for 2 years before moving to Stockholm, and Norrköping I found to be an extremely small town. But if you look at the statistics, Norrköping is like a top 10 biggest city in Sweden, which to me is mind-blowing because, you know, right around 100 to 200,000 people in that Norrköping area. I'm thinking, wow, this is really small. And after living there for almost 2 years, a year and a half, I started to get really bored. I'm not really a small town guy. And that's why I've moved to Stockholm, just because there's so many activities, there's so many things to do in Stockholm. And I really like that. And Stockholm is around the same size as Portland, the city that I grew up in. And I thought, okay, even these cities are not super big. I love going to cities that are really big, like LA and New York, and I just feel like there's so many things to do. I really, really love that. But I think it's nice to mix it up from time to time and get a completely new perspective, because a lot of times I talk on my channel comparing America and Sweden, and you guys know that my perspective might be a little bit warped living in Stockholm. For example, when I say Sweden is super expensive, I'm comparing my rent in Vasastan in the inner city of Stockholm. That's like if somebody lives in Manhattan in New York and they're saying America is the most expensive country ever because they live in Manhattan. Like, of course, there are going to be tons of differences between where you are in the country and the overall generalizations in the entire country. So going to Barberry, Barberry I think is a town between 30 and 60,000 people, much, much, much smaller than Stockholm and even smaller than Norrköping. So I was always surprised when people from these smaller Swedish towns would come to Norrköping and they're like, wow, Norrköping, it's such a big city. And I'm like, what? That is, to me, that was absolutely insane. But when you go to an even smaller town in Sweden, you start to realize, wow, it's really not as much. And I thought that Barberry was a very, very cute town. You could walk across the entire town in, 15, 20 minutes and you'd seen all of Barberry. At least it seemed like that to me. In the weekend that we were there, we went out to a ton of restaurants. Super cool, super nice, and actually had a lot of great food and a lot of great experiences. While I was there, we stayed at the Havana Hotel. We had rum tasting, cigar tasting, really, really cool. They're playing, Cuban, Latin American music the entire time we were at the hotel. Really, really just a cool vibe overall. Now, the thing that really surprised me about being in Barberry is how inexpensive the cost of living was compared to Stockholm. Just from asking my friends that I was staying with, what does it cost to rent like a one-roomer or like a one-bedroom place in Barberry? And they were saying, between $300 and $400 a month, you could actually have a place to live. And to me, I'm going, wow. Now, with that being said, even though the cost of housing is much, much cheaper than what you would find here in Stockholm, I didn't find that other aspects of the living were extremely cheap, at least in my experience, because maybe we were going out to some of the nicer restaurants in Barberry, but it was very easy to spend $50, $60 on a single dinner when you have a couple of drinks and those sorts of things. And of course, we're in vacation mode. We're trying to enjoy the most of it. And one thing I thought was quite interesting in Barberry is they have these raggarbil. It's like the kind of like country looking cars, or maybe like redneck cars, what we would say in America, like the really, really old style. And they were saying, yeah, that's kind of like a Barberry thing. You're a little bit more on the countryside. You're going to see some of these cars. And a lot of times it's like I think 15-year-olds or 14-year-olds that can drive these cars that only go up to like 30 kilometers an hour. So they modify them and they put like the thing on the back that shows people that it's a slow moving vehicle. I thought that was kind of interesting because as my friends were saying, oh, you're going to see a lot of raggarbills in Barberry, right when they said that, like a Porsche, a BMW, and an Audi went by. And I'm like, wait a sec, what's going on here? So it seemed like the cars in Barberry were like either super nice, expensive cars or like the kind of redneck cars. There was like not a lot of in between, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe people will spend more money on their cars because the cost of living is so much less expensive for housing in Barberry. Maybe I'm onto something there. Not really sure. Here in Stockholm, I don't even own a car. I think it would be annoying to try to find parking in this city. I like the fact that I can pretty much walk or take the bus anywhere I need to go. I think that's just me being a city guy, and that's the way I like it. Now, one other thing I did want to mention about my trip to Barberry is the people there seem to be very, very friendly in my opinion. Pretty much everywhere I went in Barberry with my friends, one of my friends would see somebody that they knew, they would strike up a conversation or say hello or wave. I think the small town life in Sweden, you're gonna get a lot more of everybody knowing everybody. And I think even in Stockholm, that tends to happen a lot of times where I just feel like everybody kind of sort of knows everybody, at least for like a big city. But you know, when you go to the smaller towns, that's obviously extremely much more. And I just got the sense that people were happier, friendlier, maybe just a little bit more laid back and easygoing. I think a lot of times people in Stockholm sort of have this stereotype of being super busy, super into themselves. They got a ton of things going on. They're going here to do this, they're going here to do that. I'm definitely guilty of this as well, putting my AirPods in and just walking to where I need to get to really fast, or always having something going on. And there is something nice, I have to say, about having a more relaxed lifestyle if you're that type of person. I personally I like to have that faster paced life. And I think that a lot of people, they sort of stereotype Stockholmers as being a little bit more rude or cold or harsh, and maybe that can play into people's perceptions of this Swedish stereotype. A lot of times when people talk about Sweden, they talk about Stockholm even though maybe only 1/5 of the Swedish population lives in the Stockholm metro area. There's a lot more to Sweden than just Stockholm. That's 100% the case. But it almost seems like sometimes people think that Stockholmers are kind of like a little bit nose in the air, a little bit like they think they're the coolest people. And I could definitely get that sense of like when somebody comes from Stockholm that they just think they're cool. Like I was talking to somebody like, oh, what are you doing tonight in Barberry? And they're like, yeah, we're gonna watch Dancing with the Stars. And I was like, oh, who are you rooting for? And they're like, oh, we're gonna root for Honest. And I'm like, oh, I live right next to Honest. He's like my neighbor. And they're like, oh, really? Blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I kind of felt weird, like, oh, I'm the cool Stockholmer that's like knowing everything that's going on. And I don't know, maybe people from the smaller towns think that the Stockholmers maybe look down on them. That was not my intention as well. But like after that, I was like, maybe that kind of felt a little bit weird. Not 100% sure. So with that being said, guys, I don't want to keep this video too long. I just wanted to reflect a bit on my trip to Barberry and what I learned about Swedish culture having been there. If you like what I talk about on my channel, different cultures, different places, a lot of America and Sweden, being an American that lives here in Sweden, be sure to press the subscribe button. Again, I'm getting so close to 100K. I can't wait to hit that, and you guys are making all the difference and making this YouTube journey so much fun to be on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video.